welcome. You're watching News 9. This is the AI Report, our weekly feature on all that's happening in the world of artificial intelligence. On the show today, we will discuss, are humans really training artificial intelligence to eventually take their own jobs? Also on the show, we will discuss, why is Anthropic's mythos so scary and why are policymakers so afraid of using that tool? And of course, if you thought there is something that robotics cannot do, we'll tell you what is that something. All that and more on this edition of the AI Report. First up, let's begin with the corporate stories in the world of artificial intelligence. Meta seems to be doubling down on AI. Now, the company will work along with Broadcom to develop multiple generations of custom-built AI processors for its platforms. Here's a report.
Meta is expanding its deal with chip designer Broadcom to build several generations of custom processors to power AI features across its apps. The deal announced Tuesday extends their partnership through 2029. It includes an initial commitment of more than 1 gigawatt of computing capacity, enough to power roughly 750,000 US homes. The agreement also brings a boardroom change. Broadcom CEO Hock Tan will step down from Meta's board and take on an advisory role focused on custom chip strategy, according to a joint statement. Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg said the deal helps build the computing backbone needed to supply, quote, personal superintelligence to billions of people. As AI drives soaring demand for computing, tech giants such as Meta, Google, and Amazon are designing their own silicon to reduce reliance on NVIDIA's expensive processors.
All right, that's a big development coming from Meta and Broadcom. Meanwhile, some other developments in the artificial intelligence space over the week gone by. Take a look at this report.
From billions in earnings for chip makers to Anthropic's cybersecurity concerns, this is AI Weekly. China's chip industry is also showing strong growth momentum as a global sprint to build AI infrastructure creates a demand explosion. Semiconductor industry executives said higher capital spending and capacity expansion has chip makers racing to keep up. China's manufacturing capacity for chips used in cars, smartphones, and electronics is projected to reach 42% of global output by 2028, according to one industry executive. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell held an urgent meeting with major bank CEOs, warning of cybersecurity risks linked to Anthropic's latest AI model.
All right, we will go deeper into that mythos story in just a bit. But one video surfaced online over the week gone by, just a few days ago, in fact, and it showed that factory workers wearing head-mounted cameras while performing manual tasks in what seemed like a garment factory. That video, of course, went viral, and rows of workers can be seen intently focused on stitching and handling fabric, each with a small camera device mounted on their head. The most widely shared explanation seems to suggest that these cameras are being used to capture first-person footage of skilled laborers, potentially to train artificial intelligence systems and robots, who in turn will end up potentially replacing these very jobs of the workers who are training them. Now, how ethical is this really, and is this trend going to take the entire manufacturing space in every sector? To discuss this, we have with us today Deepak Tuli, industry expert and co-founder of Eka Care. Mr. Tuli, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us today. Of course, that video went viral and a lot of questions got raised. At the end of the day, it is factory workers who are training artificial intelligence for eventually robots to use that learning from AI, which could potentially take their own jobs. How serious is that concern at the moment?
Thank you for inviting. I would say I'm from a digital industry, and let me give you a reference from there. The first impact of AI was in the digital industry. We have seen, you heard a lot of news people, laying off different companies. But the impact in the industry as on today is positive in the job employment. So if you are laying off 100 people, you're hiring 120. That's the borderline statement. But why is that happening? Because the existing workforce is upskilling and doing something better, which they were doing earlier. For example, I was a data entry operator earlier. doing data entry operation, I may be, doing an MCP server for building the model for my own organization and stuff like those. I believe something similar will happen. I'll be foolish if I say there'll be no impact. There definitely impact in whatever we are doing. Everyone in the industry, in the world will get impacted with AI, but people will upskill. And when they upskill, they will do better jobs than what they're doing today. Especially look at the Indian context. There was this AI report which was saying 20%, 24% of the whole process can be fully automated only, saying where we are today. And then there could be about 42% additional, which could be improved. What does that mean? There are one side of looking at saying how will it work on the labor side. They will all doing the better job what they're doing today, which means maybe managing all these robots or looking at better processor assembly line and maybe training even further better models, right? That's so that the efficiency can then further improve. So all these guys we need to upskill definitely, but will they have job? As soon whoever will upskill will have the jobs. There, the number says like it could be about 30 million jobs which will get impacted by this, which mean, but if they upskill, the opportunity of this 38 will be, maybe 45, 50 million more jobs getting
Okay.
generated.
Mr. Tuli, I would have agreed with you 100% if we were talking only in the context of the services industry. But here we are talking about factory workers, and this is pretty much the lowest denominator. We've seen the kind of unrest that unfolded last week in Noida as well, with factory workers actually demanding more wages. Overall, the responsibility of upskilling, if it lies with the employees, how many of them can A, afford upskilling, and B, in a manufacturing shop floor kind of a setup, what are those upskilling worthy jobs which a major sort of a resource pool is likely to be subjected to? Because at the end of the day, stitching and packaging are things which it seems robots may be able to do quite easily. So what are the opportunities that may be left for these factory workers?
Yeah, definitely. Bang on. If you look at the scale of Indian industries today, they're very small compared to what happened in Vietnam and what happened in China. So if I'm a owner, if I'm looking from owner point of view, if my output increases, I can upscale my factories. I can make larger and even larger factories. What does that mean? That means there'll be more space, which means there'll be more robo and there'll be more people managing those robots. So that upskill could be because I'm an expert in packaging. And today I was doing it myself. Tomorrow I will be managing 100 robots and making sure the process is running efficiently and improving every day. That's my upskill as a laborer.
Right.
And because today there were 100 people working, now there are 100,000 robots working in that industry, which will be like country like India today. That could be a massive opportunity.
Absolutely. It will be a
Saying
massive
how
opportunity, but then there must also be enough demand for the plethora of additional goods that get produced in those factories. But operationally speaking, Mr. Tuli, there seems to be sort of, this concern, at least as far as the P&L and the balance sheets of companies goes. And that happens to be from the fact that robots are going to be high capex, whereas employees, especially in a country like India, and you mentioned China and Vietnam, happen to be low OPEX. So this CAPEX versus OPEX battle, how geared up is the Indian shop floor and the larger sort of MSME space, which is the bulk, the backbone really of manufacturing, to really invest in robos? That's the sort of counter theory. Will they be able to afford robos really replacing the low-cost employees who are serving the purpose right now?
The answer would be then in twofold. Short term, I would find it very hard for India, China, Vietnam. But long term, yes, because the cost of these robots are getting down drastically and there'll be enough capital. I don't see there's dearth of capital to be invested. So today, the amount of investment comes to Indian manufacturing is quite low. If I'm a startup manufacturer, I would, it'll be hard for me to raise capital. But with the robots and the opportunity to make more money, the capital will flow in. I've always worked in a digital industry. Whenever there is a change, the capital flows in. I don't see capital would be a big challenge. I think the
Okay.
mindset needs to switch.
All right. So capital will not be the problem. It is actually going to be the mindset. Well, let's leave it at that. Mr. Deepak Tuli, pleasure having you here with us on the AI Report. And thank you so much for putting that story in perspective for all our viewers here. So that seems to be the word really coming in, that it is not going to be capital that is going to be a challenge. If anything, it is going to be a short-term sort of continuity before a long-term mindset change. And that reality may soon unfold where robots end up doing the job of human beings. Well, with that, we will slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, Anthropic mythos. Why is the world so scared of of a tool which is yet to be unleashed for public use. We'll bring you a perspective on that on the other side. You're watching the AI Report.